Guys doing?
Well, Aaron, what was the biggest concerns from that first half? And things you guys needed to address? Obviously, a tough task.
Yeah, 100%. Well, first of all, I want to give credit to Oregon. They got a phenomenal football team. Coach Lannon, right? Guys were flying around. They got really good players. They did a tremendous job. But I think part of that is, I think it was, and I want to be very, very careful how I say this. I think that was needed for us. Like you always talk about, like we're playing the #1 team in the country, right? In a very hostile environment. And the reality of it is that when you're playing those kind of teams, you can't not play a quarter, not play a half, and expect to be successful. You know what I'm saying? And so, like, coming out of that, I guess the biggest thing for me is, right, like, obviously they scored 35 points in the first half, and they scored 3 in the second half. Whether they let up, whether they didn't let up, right, we had some guys in the second half that stepped up, that owned that moment, that had an opportunity, that took full advantage of it. And I think from my perspective, for sure, there's every game, there's a couple of calls that I wish that I had back, but I think the reality of it is that we didn't execute every time we had an opportunity. It was just some things that were glaring, obviously, on the film, just holistically, right? Like anytime I look at a game like that, right, I look at missed tackles are always glaring in those segments, right? And one thing I ask myself the question is, am I putting guys in a proper position to make that tackle so that they wouldn't miss it, right? If I know a young man has limitations or he's great at it, am I putting him in a better position to make that tackle? And so that's a holistic approach that me and my staff have to continue to take as we watch film of this caliber, as we play teams of this caliber, just to ensure, right, like we got to come out ready from the get-go. And I felt like going into that game we were, and obviously they got a couple big ones to start, and lo and behold, it was 7-0 and 14-0, and then it kind of spiraled out of control a little bit. But I was very, very excited about how they responded in the second half. But reality of it is, it wasn't good enough, right? We end up losing the game. There is no moral victories, right, in college football, especially when you're playing that caliber team. But the reality of it is right, like, it was some great teachable lessons, teachable moments, not only for myself, but for our players that we can grow and learn from in these segments.
Aaron, obviously takeaways have been really key for you.
Yeah.
What do you feel like is the identity of your defense, or what you can hang your hat on if those aren't coming in bunches?
I think just proper execution. Like even when we hadn't got takeaways, right? Things that have been giving us a chance is us being able to get properly aligned and us being able to just make tackles, right? Even if it's for a 3, 4, 5 yard gain, right? Keeping the ball in front of us, and not being thrown over our head, And so I think at the end of the day, right, like the goal, I guess in my realm of things is like the ball is the most important thing on the football field, right? And so, you obviously try to preach takeaways every game, and we've been very fortunate, right, to have some of those, especially early on. But like, I'm going to always, as long as I'm a coach, I'm going to always harp on taking the ball away, because again, a team can rush for a handful of yards or throw for a handful of yards, but if they turn the ball over 5, 6, 7 times, you got a chance to win that ball game. And so, like coming out of that game, right, like it's always harping on like did we have enough shots and enough instances to take those balls away, right? And when they don't occur, right, we have to be technically sound, and we got to be fundamentally sound that we do our job and execute. And we did it on some plays, and some plays we didn't. And the result of some of that was obviously they had some good players as well, but the result of some of that, like when it didn't go in our facet, some of those went for touchdowns, right? And they just can't happen against those caliber teams. You know what I'm saying? And so, especially if you want to be in that game and try to win it.
Minnesota, what do you see from them offensively?
Well, first and foremost, right, like I think Coach Fleck is like historically done a really good job there, right? Like he's that's always a really gritty team. They are fundamentally sound. They're going to run the football. They're going to throw the football, right? Like they got some really good players at some very, very key positions that make them a tall task, right? Quarterback, right? I think Brosner, is it Max Brosner, right? He does a phenomenal job in running that offense, right? Well, prior to him, they had quarterbacks who also did a phenomenal job. Didn't They didn't force the ball into action and have a lot of turnovers, right? And so they're very, very smart with the football. The running backs, right? The running backs, they run hard, they run downhill, and they do what they can to just keep moving the chains, right? And they'll take their shots down the field when you're sleeping. But I think what makes this offense very, 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 very special, right, is on top of them having a really good O-line, on top of them having a really good quarterback and a good running back, I think there's a receiver on that team. I think it's Daniel Jackson, 9. I think he's probably the most underrated receiver in the country. I will go on record and say that young man is absolutely special, you know, and he's just done his job. He's did his job every single year, and he flies under the radar. But when catches or big plays need to be made, that guy is always on the radar, right? And so we got to do a really good job in understanding where he's lined up at. We got to do a really good job, obviously, in making sure that we stop the run, you know, so that they don't open up the pass game, right, and have kind of both those things to lean on. But they got a really, really good offense, right? And obviously this is that time of year where you start to get in the later part of the season, guys start to get dinged up, and the weather starts to change a little bit. But I mean, this team, they're playing at a very, very high level at this point in the season, and so it's going to be a tall task, but we got to do what we can do and do what we should do in order to try to stop them every time we get a chance. But they got some talented players, which we know moving from here on out, every team that we're going to play is going to have talented players, but they got some players that could truly beat you in one-on-one settings, and we can't allow that to happen.
Can I ask you about that Tez Johnson touchdown, the first one?
Yeah.
Drop 3. I know sometimes you want to change
drop 8.
Drop 8, yes.
Sir.
Rush 3. I know you want to change the picture sometimes, but other people see Gabe and Seth in the background. So can you explain that?
Yeah, for sure, right? Like, I think that's always a question, right? Like, I guess as a play caller, you have to in the back of my mind, you have to dial up or try to decide, okay, all right, so this quarterback had been delivering the ball at around 2.4 seconds, right? So he hadn't given up a lot of sacks, partially because he was getting the ball out relatively fast, right? So do you rush 5 and leave Tez Johnson in one-on-one coverage, right, which we didn't want, right? Or do you play coverage and bring 3? Sometimes I brought 4 on that particular play. I brought 3. Or do you drop coverage in hopes that, you know, he'll pat the ball a little bit longer, right, and maybe miss a throw, you know? And so on that particular play, right, in my mind and what I had seen on film, right, I know that in certain areas of the field when he was pressured, his percentages went down. Well, in that area of the field when he was pressured, he was lights out. He was really good, right? And so my goal at that moment was to make sure, right, it was 3rd and 6, right? The prior 3rd down, we had been in man-to-man coverage and they hit us on the screen, okay? And so I had to weigh my odds there, right? And I knew exactly what I wanted to go to. And obviously he had some time. He was able to pat the ball a little bit. But that call has been a very significant call for us. He found Tez, right? And, I mean, Tez Johnson's a really good player, right? Like, that's the reality of it. He was bottled up. He had about 4 or 5 guys around him, and he made a miss. That's a very, very elite, talented player, right? And had we had one guy on him to cover him, maybe the same result of that happens, right? Maybe it doesn't. Not too sure, but I do know this, right? Like, that call has been a really good call for us, right? There's always a call or 2 or 3 calls that I would like to have back in that game. And had I known they was going to score a touchdown prior to me calling that, I probably would have called something else, right? And so I was just trying to make sure, right? We knew that was the guy, that was the target on 3rd down. And so that's the reason why we did drop 8, because we felt like we were more suitable in that manner to not give up the touchdown, to not give up the long ball. And historically here, when we have dropped 8, we haven't given those catch and runs for 30 or 40 yards up, and I think that speaks to how dynamic that young man was. And I think more importantly, right, when you're trying to eval those things and eval those situations, right, is there another call I could have went to? Yeah, for sure, 100%. There's a man-free call I could have went to. Could I have doubled him? Absolutely, probably could have doubled him in that same manner. But, you know, like, I think if you give up a touchdown, no matter what the call is, you're going to always have regrets on, right, could this call or that call have been better, you know? So, again, I take full responsibility for that, and I have to do a better job of putting our guys in a better position. But I think at the end of the day, man, like, good players make good things happen, right? And if you hit pause on the film, we have like 4 or 5 guys around him to tackle him, and he does a damn good job at making some guys miss, and he gets to the end zone and he scores a touchdown. Obviously, we like to catch and tackle right there to live another down, but like I think that's a part of playing the game, and you gotta live with that when those calls are made, and in order to move on and be better from it.
Aaron, the first 2 drives where they went 7-0, 14-0.
Yeah.
They went 4 for 4 on 3rd down.
Yeah.
My question is, did you like where you guys were on early downs? Did you even go on schedule?
Yeah, I did. I really, really did. And I gave them a combination of man. I gave them a combination of zone on 3rd down. And they got good players, right? You know what I'm saying? And so I did like the track that we were on early downs. I felt like we were getting them to some suitable 3rd downs for us. But I have to do a much better job in helping our guys out. In terms of some of those play calls, man, because I mean, I think at the end of the day, it was in that specific game plan with how explosive they were. My mentality was like, let's make them drive. If it's 10, 15, right, 20 plays, let's make them drive the length of the field, and they end up getting a couple of explosives that end up leading to some very, very, very big plays, and we just got to be better. We got to be better tackling. We got to be better in our vision and break, making sure we have an understanding of where that go-to guy is, because that young man he had done that in prior games, and so we just got to continue to take the approach of being very, very detailed on if there's a guy of that caliber. He had 75 targets coming into that game, all right, and he had 57 catches, right? It was significantly more than everybody else, and I felt like we had a really, really good plan against him, because we knew that and our players knew that, but that cat's he's pretty special. He's a good player.
Seems like depth in the back end is coming into play. What have you been seeing from the guys who've been running with the 2s and 3s?
I think the coolest thing, unfortunately, about us losing was you were able to see some guys get in there and do some really good things, right? You saw Tyson Rooks show up and make a play. You saw Juice Clark, right, go in there and put his face on some people. And so right now we're obviously going to proceed as normal. We are assuming that every young man is playing that played on Saturday. Right, we had a couple of guys get dinged up, but I think at the end of the day, man, like when you recruit and you bring in talented players, we got 1st, 2nd, and 3rd team guys that I truly believe can go anywhere and play ball, and they just so happen to have some really, really good players in front of them. And so I'm not really concerned about like who's out there or who's not out there, because the plan that we put in place, we call them DBs for a reason. We got some guys that are truly interchangeable and can play all over the field, and so I can tell you this, whatever young man is out there, they're going to be more than ready for their opportunity. I wish you could have seen Tyson Rooks look in his face, right, like when he knew he was going in the game, right, and verbatim, that young man looked at me, right, knowing that obviously Tyler had just went down. He said, "Coach, I'm going to make a play." Like, he didn't bat an eye, right? He obviously was a receiver prior to, but he said, "Coach, I'm going to make a play." Right? And you should have seen his preparation prior to that. You should have seen it. You should have seen him in film study prior to that. And so just to see him go out there and I know it obviously was in the second half of the game, right? Those kind of things and those kind of moments are going to be so vital to our success moving forward, because that's a growth element that you typically don't get, right, in a loss of that caliber. Right, and so unfortunate or as bad as it was that obviously we lost the game, there was a lot of really good teachable moments and things that we as coaches, and specifically myself, can take from it to utilize, right, to help catapult us forward. Right, we got a Minnesota team that's coming in here they're playing some good football right now, and so we got to do what we can do to make sure we limit them and limit them in points and limit them in yards and take the ball away as much as we can.
All right, thanks, guys.